So, as Mike said, I'm Byron, and so let's talk about today. Let's look at the map from way far away. Here's what I'd like to happen. So, the information I'd like to present for you, that means that by the end of the talk, you should be in a position to understand some of the more recent reports from reliable sources about the kind of health problems that people are encountering as we get older. That's part one, so a really good look at that. And then the second part is a very good understanding of exactly the right kind of exercises that we can all be doing now and also long into our later years as well. Okay, so those are really my two objectives of healthy aging. I am a member of the Register of Exercise Professionals, and as Mike said, I'm credentialed as what's called a personal trainer. What it means is most of the time if you go into a leisure facility or a gym and you ask a member of staff for assistance on the gym floor, that should usually be a personal trainer, guide you around the exercise machines and bits and pieces and give you some guidance there. But what I've done is I've gone on to become quite interested in certain elements of gym training and exercise. And one of those areas is this use of strengthening exercises for people. And I've gone on to become a coach. And coaches are generally more specialist and interested in a precise field. So I now consider myself to be a coach, as I've now formulated like a philosophy of exercise, and I have a way that I like to do things. And I am very interested in what we should be doing for exercise once we get into our 40s and beyond. And I'll speak more about that in a little while as well. I coach locally in a gym just outside of Guildford in Mayford called Profound Fitness. And just like you'd imagine in any facility, we look after people on various different journeys. Some of them come for us for basic things like weight loss. We have some people that want to get a bit more, improve their athletic ability, and sometimes, yes, their appearance, and we do that as well. But what we're more becoming known for is our use of specialisms, and this is to do with things like injury rehabilitation, research into people who are on specific journeys with their health, people with arthritis, back pain, other such conditions. And so we actually go into the literature, research the studies, and also do things like this talk, and work with these kind of people as well as everything you'd expect from a normal facility. So one thing that's going to become quite apparent today is that we have taken these series of exercises, we've learned how to do this, and in a way turned it into what I'm going to refer to as a kind of an exercise prescription. All right, so it may not be like some things you've seen done before, and this prescription is for healthy aging, and it really does work like no other system in the world does. And I'm really quite excited to tell you more about it and go through. I mentioned a minute ago that I coach at this place called Profound Fitness, so I thought I'd show you a quick picture of it. So here is Profound Fitness, just in Mayford, just outside of Guildford. You'll notice straight away that there's a lot of space in the picture. We don't have a lot of stuff. And that's because a while ago we realised something in our coaching, in our structure, and our strategy that we now use. And the thing that we realised was that some of the best, most effective tools in a gym are not machines. So when you look at the picture, you'll notice we don't have a lot of machines. Traditionally, if you look on the internet for pictures of gym floors, you'll see machine after machine after machine. And we just don't have that many of them. I'll tell you a little bit about why that is, and that is one of the reasons we've found is that once we get people working with what we call free weights, these are little dumbbells that you might hold, you might have heard of kettlebells, or even the barbell, which we'll be seeing in some videos. That's the long bar that you see at the Olympics. When we get people moving with these, we seem to have a much higher effectiveness ratio for the exercise prescription. So we have removed almost all of the machines from our methodology, and the other thing that we're not so keen on with machines is because they are bolted to the structure of a building, once you're in them, you have no opportunity to train balance. You cannot fall because it's bolted to the building, and so we like to get people actually practicing for balance when they train with us, because that is, it turns out, balance is a great big deal as we get older. Or I could also say not falling is a great big deal as we get older. And so that's why a lot of the time in our gym you see people training standing up, because we want them to get better at balancing. All right. So have I missed anything on my list here? The other thing is that, another thing that we're not quite conventional, is that we have a one-to-one ratio between coach and client. So personally, what we like to do is we don't have a membership base. There's never a busy gym floor. You come in and there's only you and the coach that you're working with. And that means that we've gotten people very, very confident in themselves and in what we're coaching them quite quickly, because they've got that level of care with every single person. So our coach to client ratio, the way we like to do it, is 1-to-1, and at other gyms you may notice 50 or 100 people on the gym floor, and you'll be looking looking for guidance, but that's how we like to do it where we are. You're probably wondering about who comes to us. Well, I've alluded to that already, but I can tell you now, we have a wide range of people. This is everyone from, we have teenage athletes who are GB athletes, all the way through to folks who are in their 5th, 6th and 7th and beyond decades. And we manage all sorts of conditions with them as well. Some of them have presenting conditions such as arthritis or back pain or many other things. And some of them are not, and they just want to enhance their athletic performance. And so that's kind of who we look out for at Profound Fitness. Now, before we go any further, because I think I know what you guys are thinking, so I just want you to put out of your mind 2 things before we go on any further. So the first is, put out of your mind that as we get older, becoming weaker is just mandatory. Okay, let's ditch that for 1 minute, okay? Becoming weaker is not mandatory. I'm in my 40s now. I'm stronger in my 40s than I was in my 20s. All right, and most folks who I start training, and I run the exercise prescription with them, they get stronger. They all do. Okay, so get rid of that first of all. The second thing is, put out of your mind that when we talk about strengthening exercises, that they are only for fit young 20-somethings, okay, who want to go and do athletics and track and field and all those kind of sports, okay? So detach those 2 things, because this afternoon I am going to take you on a different journey. And as I said, we have trained GB athletes and competitive athletes, but what is more common with what we do is training their mum and dad, right? And I've got grandparents that I train, and we've got much more of that demographic than we do the GB athletes, just so you know, okay? Right, so a little bit about the beginnings of this talk and how it came about. So overall, there has been quite a shift in the kind of mindset and the approach of the industry, and that's probably putting it mildly. It's certainly moving over now to viewing exercise as like a kind of medicine. And that's a good thing, I think, because when we put exercise over as a medicine, it enables us to move something that previously may have only been sort of entertaining into a branch of science. And the advantage of being in the science end of the deal is that we can treat it like a science, in that we can calibrate it, we can measure it, we can track it. And when we work with people, we like to do that. We like to show them that week by week, progress is actually happening and we're writing it down, and it's happening in real time. And so that's the major shift in formulation that's gone on from the traditional sort of exercise model that you may have encountered when you've been into leisure facilities before, sports centres, etc. Okay. As we go through, we'll learn a bit more about that. All right. Okay, so now I want to introduce you to someone who is one of the really foremost people that is responsible for the kind of work we're doing now. His name is Dr. Jonathan Sullivan. Now Sullivan, he is in the orange top here. That's Dr. Sullivan there, and this is him at his gym in Michigan with some of the people that train with him. He is an emergency doctor, an ER doctor, medical doctor, who has also now gone on, like I have done, to branch out specifically into coaching and for people with strengthening exercises, all right? And he is a very interesting case because he's got such a strong medical background. He is able to really get into the scientific literature and has helped formulate this exercise prescription. And I want you to know that, so you know it's not just coming from coaches and trainers and gyms, but we're going to see just how rooted this thing is, way, way up the chain at some very important levels. So this is Dr. Sullivan, and a few years ago he authored a book called The Barbell Prescription. And again, this is all about strength training for when we're in our 40s and beyond. And the reason that Dr. Sullivan went down this route is because he realised we had a couple of problems. there were two problems. The first problem was that although the industry is obsessed with people in their 20s and 30s and events and classes and products for them, a huge demographic of people who really would benefit the most from this kind of exercise approach were being left out. And so he spotted that there was a big problem in that there wasn't very good, clear instructions for exercise for people who are over 40. And that's a big element of the book that he has written. Now the second thing, I said there were two things, the second thing, and I'll pose this as a general question for you to think about. Have you ever been to your doctor, to your GP for a checkup or a meeting, whatever you needed, and at the end of that session, they said to you, oh, and get some exercise? Okay? Or has anyone not had that yet? So, right, well, okay, that tells me that no hands went up when I said that. So pretty much everyone has had the phrase, oh, and get some exercise. Right. Now, here's the little problem. The phrase some exercise, it doesn't really mean anything. And Dr. Sullivan realised this. And a doctor would never write a prescription that just said some medicine, because there's no clarification there, you see. So to my ears as a coach, some exercise, it sounds like a doctor's ears, some medicine. We want to know some very specific things about that prescription. We'd like to know the formulation, what's it made of. We'd like to know the timing and the frequency of that medicine, and we'd like to know something called the therapeutic window. And the therapeutic window is terribly important, because the therapeutic window, if we are within that window, if we go too low, we haven't dosed the medicine well enough and we've got a treatment failure. And if we go too much, then we hit a toxic dosage and we could cause harm. And so that's the therapeutic window, is the region in between that. And so this is what Dr. Sullivan realised, and it's important to understand that that's why we are now looking at this exercise as a prescription. We can really calibrate it like that. So here's Sully. Sorry, he goes by the name Sully, and when I email him, he just signs off Sully. So Sully it is. Here's Sully coaching one of his ladies at his gym, Greysteel in Michigan. And that's the barbell that I spoke about earlier. That's what one of those looks like. And we have those at Profound as well. And we have lots of other free weights as well. And these are not machine-based exercises. And so there's him in action. Here's an interesting thing that Sullivan says. The exercise prescription, when it's used, it works every single time. Now, I've coached this method, I've used this method from his book, from my learning, from the teaching I've had from him, and from the system as a whole, and I've run this with people as well, certainly over the last 12 months. My other colleague who's here as well, who I'll introduce later, has also run similar systems, and I'll be damned, it works every single time. Sullivan makes a point in one of his talks of saying, he says, we don't even have medicines that are 100% every single time. So it's quite an interesting thing in life. We have very few guarantees, but this exercise prescription is very simple and is extremely effective. And that's something that he pointed out that I wanted to mention to you as well. Okay, now, so these developments in this way of thinking about exercise as medicine have not gone unnoticed. It turns out that some very, very big players in the industry have also realised that we have a situation at hand and that we think there's a solution to it. So the first one I wanted to draw your attention to was the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization in 2003 published one of their major reports. They take a big old look from way far away on the map globally at trends of physical activity, diet, what's happening with people's health. And they do this about every 20 years, so we're almost due the next one any minute now. But I want to give you a couple of quick findings. Now, the report is 140 pages is long. Now, the good news is I've got it down to 2 slides, so you'll be really it's quite a read. But the critical things I'm going to cover with you now that the World Health Organization found, and I'll just read this off the slide for you. So the first one is, there is now a large convincing body of evidence that dietary patterns And the level of physical activity can not only influence existing health levels, but also determine whether an individual will develop chronic diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. And it goes on to say that these chronic diseases remain the main causes of premature death and disability in industrialized countries. Okay, so that's kind of important, that finding. There are some differences, ironically, in human history about that, which I'll come to shortly, which are interesting to note. So, things they went into within the report that I've extracted for information for you, is they looked at this long and short-term outcome on our lives based on lifestyle choices, things that we can actually do and things that we can choose to do to benefit us. Long-term and short-term, and that related to food and to exercise. Now the next one links to where one of our presenting problems might actually be. Is point 2 here. We live in a time where we have an abundance of food and plenty of food choices, but also mechanisation. In other words, so we've got planes, trains and automobiles and all these great things. So we are more sedentary, and our working lives, as you must have noticed, are now more based around being seated and using machines, and we have a less physical working life in general. We move less because we've got the convenience of transportation, which is awfully useful. But there's a trade-off, and the trade-off with those advances is that we are more sedentary. And that is a bit of an issue, because at the same time as moving less, we are able to access more food, because we now have things, not only a well-stocked supermarket, but supermarkets that will deliver, fast food places that will deliver as well. So we're less active, less generally physically strong, because we've got machines to solve those problems for us. And we also now have this food technology that's come in, and I'm sure you must remember, as I do as a child, there was less options in the supermarket and more healthy ones, and there was less packaged options originally, less ones that you could leave on the shelf for a very long time or in the freezer. But now it's much more common to have more of those food groups, just as well as the fresh ones we still have, but lots more convenience foods. Now, side note, this isn't part of the talk, but just know that some of those foods are extremely calorie rich. They are engineered, and I mean literally engineered, to be delicious, but they're very, very calorie dense. So there's lots of energy in them that we're taking on when we consume them. We're not as active as we could be, so we're not burning that energy. So you can see the sort of perfect storm that we can find ourselves in here. And that's what I wanted to highlight from point number 2, okay? So technology is great, but there's a few trapdoors. Okay, and then these last points here is what the World Health Organization was sort of drilling down on, is that we're not trending towards passing away from things like cholera or malaria or famine. You know, we've sort of solved these issues now. And what they've really found is that we're looking at these non-communicable diseases, weirdly, diseases of abundance. Diseases of, we've never had it as good as this with all the facilities and resources we have, but we've also started to get a bit sick from that type of living. So that was the key points from the World Health Report that Sullivan read, that other people have read, that we realised we really are on the top of something here that we need to deal with. The next thing came from the United Kingdom, and it came from a report called the Chief Medical Officer's Report. And this was very interesting. Mike and I went through this report. Mike is the gentleman that is the founder of the gym that I coach at. In quite a little detail, we went through the report. And I'll just read out the quote. So it's page 1, paragraph 1 of the report. That's what's so interesting about this. But it says as follows: if physical activity were a drug, we would refer to it as a miracle cure due to the great many illnesses it can prevent and help treat. And this was right up front of that booklet, and it's published in 2019 in September by the Chief Medical Officers for the United Kingdom. And within that booklet, they talk a lot about the strengthening exercises and the use of them for lots of people. Okay, so we'll come on to those shortly. Now, I have tried to remove as many buzzwords from this presentation as possible, and like industry lingo, but there's just a couple, if you'll allow me these two, and I'll tell you exactly what they mean. So let's get them done now, so we can talk really precisely about what's going to happen next, okay? Here's the buzzwords. The buzzwords are genotype and phenotype. Let's talk about what they mean in terms of the definitions of them. So genotype, think of that as your genetic blueprint, the plans for you that are built in, okay? The next word is phenotype, and phenotype is how the genetic blueprint that you have will express itself beyond hair and eye colour. So it is affected by your lifestyle choices and by your environment, okay? But it's based upon your genotype, all right? Now, it may not mean very much now, so I'm going to show you a slide now that will help demystify this a little bit for you, put it into real visual terms. You're about to see a slide of identical twins. So these people have the same genotype, but according to lifestyle choices and environment, you can see although they have the same genetic blueprint, their phenotype has come quite visually different, all right? And it just confirms that we can influence that phenotype. We can take an influence on that according to how we choose to lead our lives and what we do by these two identical twins, Otto and Ewald. So they have no alterations to their inherited DNA, but it can be expressed differently according to the lifestyle choices we make. And this is the important part. Now that we understand this phenotype, this is where science and medical community is picking up on this phrase and using it. I wanted you to know about it in case in reading you come across it, so we can be absolutely clear about what it means. This lifestyle choice basically decides whether or not, in terms of our phenotype, we are going to be on the healthy aging phenotype, which is the one I want you all to be on, or the other track. And the other track is being described as the sick aging phenotype. All right, so those are two tracks, okay, and that's why I mentioned those two buzzwords. This is what the CMO, the Chief Medical Officers, noticed. This is what the World Health Organization were talking about, and it's all to do with these diseases of our time, these non-communicable, the NCDs, non-communicable diseases, and they contribute to that sick aging phenotype, which we'd like to steer away from and move over to the healthy aging phenotype. So let's have a look at this. Okay, so our target is to go after and avoid the sick aging phenotype. And I'm going to show you a grid now that gives you some clear terms that might be associated with this sick aging phenotype, so we can be absolutely clear about the kind of thing it involves and how this relates to aging, and then how I'm going to deal with it with the exercise prescription. So on the chart here, in no particular link, but on the frailty side, loss of bone density. So this you may have heard referred to as osteoporosis. Okay. Now, this is why I worry about my mum having a fall. She's in her early 80s now. It's because she's not as strong as she could be, but this loss of bone density can be a problem in our later years if we do have a fall, because we're not as robust as we were earlier. And so that's an issue, all right? Again, the exercise prescription is designed to deal with these things, but let's have a look at them. Loss of muscle mass. So the path of aging means, and I don't know how widely this is known, but I'll tell you it now. So once we get past the age of 30, unfortunately, we start to lose a small percentage of muscle mass on our body every year. Now, it doesn't mean that much in our 30s, but as we start to get older, that's what makes the difference when you think back to yourself in your 20s and your 30s versus parents or grandparents. That's the passage of time. That's what's happening, is that very small decline in loss in muscle mass. So one of the things that we really want to do with the exercise prescription, why it is a strengthening, specifically healthy aging, strong aging, is because it's designed to give our muscles something to do when we exercise. Because we stimulate the muscles in that fashion, we send them a signal that they are to stay on the body. We maintain our muscle mass, and ideally, like a bank account, we try to build a little bit of muscle as well, so we try to add a little bit of muscle to our frame as well, and just like a healthy bank balance, we want to have that reserved for our later years. So, loss of muscle mass, atrophy is the technical name for that. Chronic pain, probably the one that we see the most common in the gym is arthritis and back pain. Most people I've coached who are over 40 have had some sort of bad day with their back. Some have chronic back pain. Balance and weakness, we spoke about this earlier, didn't we? This is why we don't use machines. This is why we want people standing when they exercise, because we want them to train balance, okay? So that's important. Hypertension, high blood pressure. Type 2 diabetes, again, is known to arrive when unfortunately, if we gain weight, if we gain a lot of weight in terms of the fat that we're holding around our visceral organs, after a period of time, we're at risk of going into type 2 diabetes, which is a problem and a talk all of itself, right? But it is a serious health issue that we don't want to get near this territory. And so I do have people who are on weight loss journeys as well, and sometimes that's the top priority to get that done, to move them away from that risk margin back into a healthy weight category, okay? Polypharmacy. Polypharmacy is basically a tablet for this, and then another tablet that does that, and then one of those tablets has a side effect, so we take a tablet to counter the side effect. Now we've got a fourth tablet, and we keep going like this, and before you know it, we've got almost a bag of tablets, and that's polypharmacy, so lots of kind of like medicines, and medical dependency is, again, sort of frequent trips, relying a lot of times on seeing doctors and having less ability to influence our own lives and take lifestyle choices, and so needing constant check-ins with doctors. So again, frequent trips as well. So there's polypharmacy and medical dependency. They kind of go sort of hand in hand. Cardiovascular disease, I probably shouldn't have put that one at the bottom of the list. That should almost be at the top of the list, because that is one of the leading things that gets us, unfortunately. That's a big problem. I don't know if you were here in the summer when Dr Zareen came to talk about Fresh Heart Project. She's a cardiologist, and her entire talk was around that subject. Cardiovascular disease is probably one of the, unfortunately, the leading killers in the modern world. Interestingly, I remember hearing Dr Rhonda Patrick say that when she analysed it, she found that as much as 70 to 80% of those cases were preventable if the person had had lifestyle changes. And that blew me out of the water. I couldn't believe when I heard that such a large number of people could have steered off of the sick aging phenotype onto the healthy aging phenotype. So that's a pretty big deal, the cardiovascular. So that's the grid there. And from this, what we need to do is look at this method of finding out from this, now that we know the presenting problem, how we can get over to the exercise prescription, okay? And so I have a number of categories that come from Dr Sullivan and that I've also seen us use at the gym that I wanted to run you through for how we are going to do this, what we're going to do about this in terms of actually our activity. And so the first thing in terms of the criteria is, and I take it there will be no objections to this one, that it has to be safe. It has to be safe. It has to be something that we can do safely, and it has to have a high safety rating. And this would be in comparison to other forms of physical activity. Okay, so the CMO is telling us that physical activity is so important, but we have a wide variety of physical activities that we could do. So it needs to be safe. And this is why the exercise prescription is not a martial art. It's not kickboxing or boxing, because again, that's not a health outcome. Getting hit, it's not a health outcome. So it's not that, but it does have to be safe. Also, it has to be effective. Just, as I said, just like a medicine, we want our prescription to be very, very precise, and we want it to have a very specific thing that it is targeting. We're not just arbitrarily doing it, we are going after something in particular, we are going after that sick aging phenotype. Next, it needs to be time efficient, because I don't have anyone that I'm currently coaching that is not a busy person. And they're either busy with their kids, or they're busy with their work, or they're just busy. But they all need something that is time efficient. And so we have a phrase that we like to use, and that is called ROI, return on investment. And what that means is when you go into the gym, if we have an exercise, and we do, which I'll show you shortly, if we have an exercise that can train a vast amount of the body in just one exercise, we choose that exercise. The alternative would be, let's say, machines, where you sit in the machine and it does one thing, and then you sit in another machine and it does another thing, and then it does this thing. 4 or 5 machines later. But if we can do all that in just one exercise, why would we do anything else? Yeah. So we want that efficiency in how we operate. Of course, we want to be able to look after a wide range of people. So it's not just about working for athletes. It's also about looking after all sorts of different people that can use it as well. So it needs to be very, very multi-purpose. It needs to be year-round. So this is why we are doing this indoors. This is why we're using something like a gym facility. All right. It matters to you because when if you're looking to implement this, you're going to be looking for a facility that's close to where you're living, to your house. We also have people that have taken the setup that we use and built home gyms. Don't be alarmed, but because what we use is so minimal, we have with several clients now that we look after that have a basic setup at home and do their exercise at home. They, as it happens, come and see us just to tune up and make sure everything's going well. But they can actually do this at home, but most of them generally have gym memberships, okay? So yes, it needs to be year-round because unfortunately, good old England, we don't quite have the climate to be outdoors all the time. So this is again why the exercise prescription is not hiking or woodland walking, because we don't have the light and we don't have the weather, unfortunately, reliably, and this is why we do it indoors. And lastly, and I mentioned this earlier, it has to be scalable, just like medicine. So what it means is I can take the system and I can use it for someone who's 20s or 30s and is pretty strong already, but also if his mum or dad comes in, and let's say they're 30 years older, I need to be able to use this prescription and it needs to work for them as well, and it has to be therefore scalable. And I've brought something with me to show you, because when we dose this medicine, I want you to understand that we can precisely, exquisitely dose the exercise that we're giving you in terms of how hard or easy it is, all right? So when we hand you something to move in one of the exercises, we have these little plates here. Now, I'll just hold them up because there's so many of you in here today. These little plates slide on the end of the barbell that you saw in that picture earlier, okay? And each one of these ones just weighs 0.25 kilograms. So it's very, very light. I'll leave these up here at the end if you wanted to see them. And we have in gyms everything from 0.25 all the way up to 25 kilo plates, which are great big things that are like about the size of a car tyre. And they are very, very heavy. That's the equivalent of you taking a full bag at the airport, fully loaded, and checking that in. So we've got all plates from this little one all the way up to that, so that we can very, very precisely target the right amount of exercise for you to do in terms of what you need to do to strengthen yourself. So wherever you are, wherever a person is, they can use this approach to get just a little bit stronger every time, and that is one of the secrets of the exercise prescription, the way it can be dosed. I say that because not all exercise can be done like that. It can't all fit the exercise criteria. That's kind of important, because if I said to you, if you like salsa dancing or ballroom dancing, how do we dose ballroom dancing? Or how do we dose Tai Chi or rock climbing or ice skating? But here we can very precisely, as a science, track and plan this approach. And so that's why that's used here. Okay.
In school, I was always not good at sports. It just took me 65 years to find the sport I was good at. I'm Dr. Catherine Walton. I'm an Emeritus Fellow of Limerick College at the University of Oxford. I now hold all the world records for my age and body weight in the World Drug-Free Powerlifting Federation. It's good to have the records because it shows people that older people can be strong. After the age of 40, your muscles start deteriorating. Cycling won't help it, swimming won't help it, walking to the shops and doing aqua gym certainly won't help it. The only thing that will keep your muscles from deteriorating is resistance exercise, lifting heavy weights. You're concentrating on what your body can do instead of what your body looks like, which is important for me and very important for a large number of younger women. 6 years ago, when I was 65, I was talking to one of my sons, and I complained to him that I was not very fit, that I didn't have time to go to the gym every week, that I was afraid it was the slippery slope. So he said, well, you ought to try lifting heavy weights for few reps, and you'd only have to do it twice a week. Well, that sounded really good to me. I remembered that there was a colleague that gave powerlifting lessons, so I went to ask him whether I was too old to begin, and he said there was only one way to find out. So we came and we started out, and I just loved it, and I've never looked back.
She is Dr. Walter. So I wanted you to hear someone else's voice speak about this, so that you felt that you weren't just being sold something by some young guy and you didn't know. But she's the real deal. She's a very interesting case, Dr. Walter. Profound, like I said, we have most of the people we coach and a lot of people that we're seeing at gyms now are understanding about the strengthening exercises. Certainly the Chief Medical Officer's report mentioned it over and over and over again. This is what Mike and I noticed when we made our recording about that subject. And so I wanted you to see Catherine do that, and I wanted you to see her exercising. To, again, at the start of the talk, I said, put out of your mind, this is something that people can't do if we're no longer in our 20s, and well, now you've seen the real deal there. But it is important, and I wanted to tell you a very quick personal story of why the strengthening exercises are fairly important, that comes from my past, because my godmother, my late godmother Ishbel, well, my mum was going to visit her one day, and I come from Hythe in Kent, and my godmother, it would appear, had sort of a little bit of a fall at the bottom of her stairs, and luckily that day my mum was just popping around to see her anyway, and so she got to the door and she realised something was wrong straight away, because she could sort of know and hear that she was there, and they were able to get the door open and help my godmother up and got her into an ambulance, and she was all looked after that. But it's important because the main thing was that once Ishbel had a fall, she wasn't able to get up. She didn't have the basic level of strength, which is the kind of strength I'm talking about in this talk, to be able to get off the ground. And that day was really life-changing for her, and that's quite important. And it was really just lucky that my mum did visit that day. But that was the last day that she had her house, because shortly after that she went into nursing care, and after that time she wasn't able to return to her independent living. And so I thought I'd mention that because it really motivated me in how I thought about what I should be doing with my exercise, and how I help people, and how I view my fellow professionals should be helping people in the right way to get the most important jobs done. And so if you were ever wondering why it would be called healthy aging is strong aging, that's why. That is why, okay? So, the other thing that Catherine Walter said that I wanted to just highlight very quickly is she said that things like aquagym and walking to the shops, etc., those won't work, okay? This is terribly important, what I'm about to say to you now. The only thing that will really get us onto the healthy aging track is this resistance training. In other words, holding some kind of weight in our hands or on our body and using our muscles, okay, to move through a series of motions. I'll show you those in just a moment, but that is the only thing that will do this. Now, it's not to say that if you enjoy hiking or swimming or dancing, it's not to say they should stop these things, but just understand that the purpose of the exercise prescription is so that you can carry on to do those things. It enables us to be able to keep doing them, but most importantly of all, to keep independence and to keep moving and to have that level of strength we all need. Okay, I mention it because the internet, if you ever go on and Google for health this or what should I be doing that, you must have noticed that the internet is full of all sorts of suggestions. There's tablets and pills and potions and all sorts of things that come back at you, but a lot of those unfortunately aren't very, very good science, and they're not very reliable, and because it's unregulated, you don't know to sift out these things that may not be that useful to you. But let me be clear that those things, they cannot do what the exercise prescription does, okay? So carry on, certainly with physical activities that you currently enjoy. Look at this as an adjunct to that, and beware of things like pills, potions, things the internet, wants to sort of sell you, that has some very convincing marketing to it. If in doubt, always try to refer to a professional to help you avoid basically spending money on something that won't really benefit you. Okay, so before we go on to the next slide, when I coach people at a gym, before I show you what I'm about to show you, is one of the first things I always do is I show everybody how to pick up an object off the ground safely. So every first session I do for someone, I show them what I call safe lifting, safe picking up, all right? And you're about to see people lifting at the gym, so I wanted you to know that they all know how to move correctly and safely before we do that. But let's now look at the exercises. Let's look at the exercises broken down, and I'll have a video for you as well so you can see them really carefully. So this one here, the sit to stand. I want you to understand that when we do this prescription, we're not thinking, with healthy aging, we're not thinking about a body part. We're not thinking about the muscle on the front of your leg, your quads, or having nice arms. We are thinking about human movement patterns, how we need to move, and things we need to be able to do. And so this is just working the action of the sit to stand, okay? Then we have the hip hinge, so bending from the waist to retrieve an object from the floor. We have reaching up overhead. More about these in a moment as well. I'm just quickly showing you them before we play the video. So reaching up overhead. And we have a pushing motion where we might need to push something away from ourselves. But again, we think more about what we need to be able to do in terms of movement, in terms of how humans move, and we train movement patterns. We don't worry so much about body parts, all right? So now, we'll have a video in a moment, and I'm going to show you, not just, because again, strengthening I think is sometimes being thought of as very much a manly pursuit, but I want to be absolutely clear, this is very much for men and women, and you saw Dr. Walter lifting already. So in the video I'm about to show you, you'll see both men and women doing these exercises, and some modifications when we can't always use the barbell. So let's have a look at that video. So here's Kerval doing a sit to stand, and I've placed a box underneath him so he can very carefully find the depth that he needs to come to. And here he's holding a dumbbell in front of him to add some weight. That's how I'm adding resistance to him to make it a little bit more challenging. That's about 10 to 12 kilos there. And here's Olivia. So she's going to be doing the same sit to stand, but she's going to do it with this barbell. So she's got the barbell on her back here. And this is how we progress the exercise too. So we start with something, maybe just body weight first of all, then the little dumbbell, and then we go over to something like the bar. Now here's Kerval doing the hip hinge. So this is our picking up exercise here. So he's retrieving an object from the ground very carefully. And this is what coaching actually looks like at the gym. One instructor, one client, that's how we like to do it. So we've got absolute precision on the movements. The next one, I believe, will be our pressing. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, this is Olivia doing the bench, doing the hip hinge motion, because I wanted you to see ladies doing this as well. This is very important that you understand this absolutely for everybody. So that's Olivia there with her barbell. Okay. All right, now we have the pushing motion. So we do this one lying down. And I'll cover exactly where these come in use in just a moment so you can know clearly where these become useful to us. But I want you to see the video so you can see them, because they really come alive when you see them in this video format. This is a lady called Siham. Now, she actually is one of my fit young 20-year-olds, but what you can't see is that a few months before this, she was having surgery on her right knee. She is a footballer that had an injured knee, and she came to me to rehabilitate that leg to get her back into competitive football. And so she's running the exercise prescription as well. And here is her reaching up overhead. That's our reaching exercise there, pressing up overhead. And there we go. So now let me break them down, how they relate to you, why they're useful. Isn't it interesting? I've only shown you 4 exercises. It's such a tendency when we go into gyms. We are so desperate to overcomplicate everything and have 10 and 15 different exercises. But as I said earlier, we want a very high return on investment. which means that we just want to have, if we can do everything in 1 or 2 exercises, that's what we want. So frequently when people come in to do the exercise prescription, they only do 3 out of 4 of those exercises. So it really is efficient. But let's break it down now. So here is this exercise, the sit to stand. Now its industry name is the squat, that's what we call it. And the squat is probably the most important of all of the exercise prescription, okay? This is the one I almost start just about everybody with first of all. If we can't do it with a bar like I've got on my back here, I'll have someone just do it with body weight so they won't have anything. They'll just sit down to the box like curvables and stand up, or a chair. And then when we're ready, we'll maybe hold a little dumbbell and start with the dumbbell. And then that will get heavier, heavier, heavier. They'll adapt to that. Then, once they've gotten strong enough there, we'll introduce a little barbell, and then we'll put some weights on the end. And remember, when we add weights, it can be just as little as this, and we're still making progress, okay? So, the sit to stand is all about being able to get in and out of chairs. It's how we power ourselves around, so it's the major motion we use for walking, for getting from A to B, it's how we get up and down stairs, okay? It's very important. It defines most of our human movement pattern. So this is a really, really important exercise that determines whether or not we can still get around in our later years. So it's absolutely important and critical, this one. Next one. This one. Now I don't want you to be alarmed because of the name of this one. This one often upsets people. I will explain. So this is our hip hinge exercise. This is what I meant about safe lifting, picking up objects off the ground safely. The dead lift. It's the only reference of the word dead is because we do it from a dead stop. So every single time we put the object back down to the ground, we come to a complete stop, a dead stop, and then we lift it again, okay? And that's why the word dead is in there, so please do not be alarmed when I say the word deadlift. But it's the art of lifting up an object very safely with a straight back, and this is important when we lift here, with a very straight back, okay? That's how we pick up objects safely off the ground. And believe me, when you've seen as many people as I have with back tweaks and back problems, and probably all of you have had at some point something with a bad back day, you know we want to get this right, okay? So there's our deadlift. The shoulder exercise, we call this the press. Now the press is my favourite exercise because it is fabulous for training balance. Because once you hold an object up overhead with your legs like so, it is wonderful for getting you to work and develop that sense of balance that you have and that sturdiness on your feet. And that's why we like to get people doing this shoulder press, because it trains the entire kinetic chain, all of the body, all the way from the wrist, all the way, right the way through down to the floor. It really is a fabulous exercise for doing so. If we have a situation where we can't train someone standing up, we might do the press sitting down on that instance. So if we did want to do it, but they're not able to stand, we can do a seated version. Once they've got balance enough to stand, this is how it looks. And then lastly, the bench press. The bench press. Now, you're probably wondering, Byron, based on that story I told you about my godmother, why don't we just do press-ups? Why not just press up? I'll answer the question for you. Many people can't press up straight away with the weight of their body, okay? That's an issue, because if we can't do it, then the formulation has failed. Yeah, we can't even get that going. So the reason we like to train this is because it means that we can pick up very, very small light weights like the ones I showed you, and start training the ability that gives us that option of pushing open a heavy door, of moving furniture, okay, and especially of being able to get up off the ground if we had a fall. And that's why this exercise that we call the bench press is in there. It is extremely important, and had I have known all of this years ago, I absolutely would have, used it for good effect then, but I learnt it too late, unfortunately. But that's what the bench press is designed to do. Okay. So, there are 2 tests that you can do. One that we're not going to do here, one that you can do at home if you wanted to, and you don't have to, but one that we can do here that we can just try in a moment, based on these exercises here. So the one that you can do at home, if you wanted to, and you don't need to, because you might already know the answer is you can try, if you are lying down, you can try, put your feet, so facing down on the floor, put your toes down, and then try to push yourself up. Okay, try to push the ground away, and notice if you're able to do that. And this is without putting your knees down, so your legs will be straight, you'll be straight, and you'll just try to push the ground away like a press up. And notice if you do have the strength to do that. That, as it turns out, is pretty important. As a general movement pattern, we need to be able to get up if we fall down. And so if I coach someone I'm not sure about, I'll strengthen them on the bench press, and then we will start to test things like the press up and getting up from the ground, so that I know they can do it. All right? So that's the one you can do at home. Again, carefully on a mat or on a soft surface, you can try that and see how you get on. All right? Probably with a loved one, just in case you do have trouble getting up, just to help you up, all right, if you needed to. And the other one you can do, which we can try now if you want to, is just a sit to stand. And how we can do it, if you want to try it, just stay seated, but just come to the edge of the chair. All right, so stay on the chair, come to the edge of the chair. Okay, now put your feet out about hip width and turn your toes outwards. Try to turn your toes out to about 30 degrees, but put some distance in between your legs. All right, now put your hands together, okay, and just rock your upper body forwards, okay? All right, now in a minute I'm going to ask you to stand up, but you're not allowed to use your hands. You're not allowed to put your hands on the person in front of you. You, from here, leaning forward, you've just got to stand up with no use of the hands. That lady got it? Okay? Good. Did anyone have to use their hands? A little bit? Okay, you can all take a seat. But this test, how easy it was or not easy, or if it was a bit challenging, or if you had to push a bit harder than you wanted to, is a good test to do by rocking forwards, rocking your weight forwards, and then standing up. It lets us know if we need to start thinking about building in exercises like this. And it's also one of the first things I do with people to see, okay, we can start, that tells me with many of you, that we can start already and progress quite nicely. So it's a good thing, depending on how smooth it was. But it just lets you know where you're at, because obviously when we have a problem with something like sitting or standing, we have to start to use our hands. It's letting you know that we've got a few things that we might want to be careful of, you know. We might be becoming a bit more unsteady on our feet, so that's fairly important. Okay, so let's go through a summary of the exercise prescription. I wanted you to have a clear understanding of it. So it's these 4 major exercises. That was our squatting, our pressing, our deadlifting, and our bench press. And the only other thing we add is a couple of short bouts of cardiovascular exercise, which are really straightforward. They can be done on an exercise bike, they can be done outdoors, they can be done at home, but we like to put a little bit of cardiovascular conditioning in as well, but the main body is the 4 exercises. Ideally, I would recommend at your gym that you look to train them about 2 to 3 times a week, if you can, 2, possibly 3, depending on how your lifestyle is and what needs to be done. It's hard to say for sure, it's according to the person. And then over time, we carefully want to increase the amount of weight that we can do with the exercises. Okay, so we add a small amount, and remember it can be just as tiny as these little 0.25s, because it's all progress at the end of the day. All right, it's all progress, but we do need to progress, because if we don't, we will backslide. Remember earlier on I said that the body, as we age, if we don't do anything, we start to lose a little bit of muscle mass as we age. And so we need to do the opposite. We now need to progress and provide more of a stimulus to stay strong and to develop more strength, okay, for men and women. All right. So let's now have a look at just a little timetable of how it might look. So if we put them into 2 different workouts, and again, this won't work for everybody, this is just a loose example, so don't think this is exactly what you should do. But a typical example is, if I'm training someone, we might have a workout A and a workout B, and they may come in on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, and they'll go A, B, A. And then the next week they'll go B, A, B, or something along those lines, all right? And in there, we make sure that they squat. That's the sitting and standing, and then they do an upper body exercise like our pressing that trains balance, and then the deadlift, that's the one where we lift off the ground. Next session we'll do the same thing again, only we'll swap the press, the shoulder press, we'll swap that over for the bench press, which is the one where we push the object away when we're lying down. And it's very, very simple. There's just not lots of things on this list. It's 3 things, but they're extremely effective, and then a little bit of cardiovascular training afterwards or at a later time in the week. Okay, so that is the presenting problem. It is the problem that doctors like Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Walter realised, that the World Health Organization have come to terms with, that the chief medical officers are now realising is a serious thing, as well as what we think is the current, best, most effective exercise prescription that you can start to do at your local gym. You can find a trainer, you can approach people like myself and Mike if you wanted to see us, but gyms should be able to accommodate this for you and get this going in your lifestyle. If there's a problem with how you do something, maybe you've got a bad shoulder or a bad knee, people that are professionals already know how to modify and change these exercises so that you'd be able to do a slightly different version of them but get just as much benefit from them. Okay, so don't be dissuaded by that, because there's always ways of, in almost all cases, we can work around things. Okay. So that's the main part of everything I wanted to talk about today in Healthy Aging is Strong Aging. I do hope the talk has been most useful for you, and I thank you all so very much for coming along today. Again, Ellie has the mailing list if you wanted to hear from us. But all from now, it's time for me to wrap up and say thank you so much for coming there, guys. Thank you, really.